The moment my wife looked at me across the marble foyer of our estate and said I wasn't her husband anymore, something inside me shattered so quietly that no one else could hear it. The grand iron gates outside, standing tall over 10 acres of manicured land in Austin, Texas, had always protected our home from the world. That evening, for the first time, they felt like the only thing protecting what remained of my heart. Within an hour, I ordered the gates locked. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But because I suddenly realized that everything I had spent 20 years building could disappear overnight. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps more uplifting stories reach people who need them most. My name was Nathan Walker, and by most standards, I had achieved the American dream. At 52 years old, I owned a successful construction company worth millions. My estate was valued at nearly $10 million. I drove luxury cars, traveled when I wanted, and never worried about paying bills. But wealth has a way of hiding problems until they become impossible to ignore. My wife, Rebecca, and I had met in church when we were young. Back then, we had almost nothing except faith, determination, and each other. We rented a tiny apartment with peeling paint and worked multiple jobs just to stay afloat. Every success I earned felt like our success. Every sacrifice felt shared. At least that was what I believed. As the years passed, my business grew rapidly. What began with one pickup truck and a handful of tools became one of the most respected construction firms in Central Texas. The bigger the company became, the more hours I spent working. I convinced myself I was doing it for my family. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet evenings at home. Whenever Rebecca complained, I promised things would slow down after the next project. Then after the next one. Then after the next. One evening, after another long week, I came home expecting silence. Instead, I found packed suitcases near the staircase. Rebecca stood beside them with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was emptiness. The kind of emptiness that develops after years of disappointment. That was when she told me she no longer saw me as her husband. She said she saw a provider, a businessman, a stranger living in the same house. She explained that somewhere along the journey to success, the man she had fallen in love with had disappeared. The word struck harder than any business failure ever could. After she left, the estate became unbearably quiet. The enormous rooms echoed with memories. Expensive furniture suddenly felt meaningless. Awards on my office walls looked ridiculous. I spent nights walking through hallways wondering how someone could gain so much and lose what mattered most. Weeks turned into months. My daughter Hannah visited often, bringing homemade meals and gentle encouragement. Unlike many people around me, she wasn't impressed by money. She reminded me of the values Rebecca and I once shared. One afternoon, she handed me an old photo album she had found in storage. As I turned the pages, I saw pictures from our early years. Rebecca smiling beside our first used car. Family picnics in public parks. Church volunteer projects. Neighborhood cookouts. We looked happy, not because of what we owned, but because of who we were together. That realization changed everything. Instead of burying myself deeper in work, I began stepping away from the company. I started mentoring young contractors who couldn't afford business training. I funded scholarship programs for local students. I volunteered with housing organizations that helped struggling families rebuild their lives. For the first time in years, I wasn't focused on expanding my wealth. I was focused on expanding my purpose. Months later, during a community housing project, I noticed Rebecca standing among a group of volunteers. She wasn't there because of me. She was there because she genuinely cared about helping others. Seeing her again brought back every emotion I had tried to suppress. Over the following months, our paths crossed repeatedly through community work. There were no dramatic speeches, no grand gestures, and no attempts to buy forgiveness. There was only consistency. Day after day, I showed up. I listened more than I talked. I became present. Slowly, something began healing. Rebecca eventually admitted that the changes she saw were different from the promises she had heard years before. These changes weren't temporary. They reflected the man she once knew. If you've made it this far and this story reminds you that relationships matter more than possessions, please leave a comment below sharing where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this message has traveled. Nearly 2 years after the day the gates were locked, Rebecca returned to the estate. But this time, the house felt different. Not because of renovations or upgrades. It felt different because the people inside had changed. One evening, as the sun set over the Texas hills, we sat together on the back porch watching our grandchildren play safely across the lawn. The estate was still worth millions. The business was still successful. Yet none of those things compared to the simple blessing of being surrounded by family. I eventually realized that locking those gates had never been about protecting my money. It had been about confronting the fear of losing everything. Ironically, the only way to regain what truly mattered was to open my heart instead of closing it. Rebecca and I never returned to being the exact people we once were. Life doesn't work that way. But we became stronger, wiser, and more grateful. We learned that relationships cannot survive on financial success alone. They require time, attention, humility, and love. And if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may need hope today, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Sometimes the greatest treasures in life aren't behind locked gates, inside bank accounts, or hidden in expensive homes. Sometimes they are the people waiting for us to remember what truly matters. And when we do, even the most broken chapters can become beautiful beginnings.